This video will cover an introduction to the pharmaceutical industry, provide an overview of the drug development process, the basic steps that happen as part of a clinical trial, what's involved with an FDA filing, and why the industry is so highly regulated. The establishment of new drugs has a well-defined development and approval process. There are several key steps to this process, which are 1. Discovery and development, which is research in the lab. 2. Preclinical research, which is non-human testing to answer basic questions about safety. 3. Clinical research, which is human testing to ensure that the drugs are safe and effective. 4. FDA review, where all of the submitted data related to the drug is evaluated to make an approval decision. And 5. FDA post-market safety monitoring, where the drugs are monitored for safety after they have been released to the public. We will be covering several key aspects of this process as part of this presentation. The FDA's job is to protect the public by enforcing regulations related to the safety, efficacy, and quality of food, drugs, and cosmetics. The FDA is actually the oldest comprehensive consumer protection agency in the U.S. federal government. In 1938, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was passed by Congress, and some key provisions in this act included things like requiring new drugs to be shown as safe before marketing, which started a new system of drug regulation, as well as authorizing factory inspections. 3 primary activities in this process are scientific testing to provide data on a product's safety and efficacy, the preparation and submission of this data and accompanying information, and the FDA's review of these regulatory submissions. We will be covering key aspects of these processes in subsequent presentations. The drug development process involves several key steps, starting with basic research to discovery, preclinical development, clinical development, which has 3 phases to it, submittal to the FDA, and finally approval and launch. One thing to note about this process is that it is a standard, and the basic steps are all publicly available on the FDA's website. Simply go to Google, type in fda.gov, and drug development process. So let's take a look at each of these steps in more detail. Basic research is focused on understanding fundamental biological or chemical processes in order to expand general knowledge. Activities include investigate cellular mechanisms, study genetic components, and explore biochemical pathways. According to the NIH, basic research experiments are performed to further scientific knowledge without an obvious or immediate benefit. The goal of basic research is to understand the function of newly discovered molecules and cells, strange phenomena, or little understood processes. So basically what this is saying is that basic research is when scientists try to get a comprehensive understanding of a human disease at a molecular level in order to help guide drug discovery efforts. Primary goal of discovery is to identify and develop new drugs based on knowledge gained from basic research. Activities are using insights from basic research to identify potential targets, screen and design compounds, and optimize molecules for further development. Discovery is a phase where typically research discover new drugs by gaining new insights into a disease process, which will help them design a product to either stop or reverse the effects of the disease. So at this stage, many tests are performed on thousands of molecular compounds in order to find a potential beneficial effect to counter these diseases. but after all of this early testing, only a small number of compounds will actually look promising and trigger further study. Before testing a drug in people, researchers need to determine if it has the potential to cause serious harm, also known as toxicity. This is where preclinical development comes in. The first three steps are collect preliminary evidence, conduct preclinical studies, and then the sponsor evaluates the drug's toxic or pharmacologic effects through in vitro and in vivo testing. In vitro testing involves studies which are performed with cells stored in lab equipment, such as test tubes and petri dishes, whereas in vivo studies are performed on an actual living animal. Usually, preclinical studies are not very large, but these studies need to provide detailed information on dosing and toxicity levels. And then the last step is submit a clinical trial application. This is a submission to the FDA asking for approval to conduct an actual clinical trial using the drug on human subjects. This is when the agency will review their findings and decide whether the drug can be tested in humans. Next, we're going to provide an overview of what the term GLP, or Good Laboratory Practice, means. The FDA requires researchers to use good laboratory practices, also known as GLP, which are defined in medical product development regulations for preclinical laboratory studies. GLP is a set of principles and guidelines that ensures the quality, integrity, and reliability of non-clinical laboratory studies, which are commonly conducted during the preclinical phase. These studies involve testing the safety and efficacy of a drug candidate in laboratory animals before advancing to human clinical trials. The key aspects of GLP in preclinical testing are data integrity, quality assurance, standard operating procedures or SOPs, performance and reporting of the study, facility and equipment, and archiving and retrieval of records. The GLP regulations are all found online. Simply Google search for CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 21, and then do a search on Part 58 under the Title 21 section. On-site inspections are performed by the FDA to ensure that toxicology laboratories are meeting GLP requirements and to verify that submitted data is accurate. Companies being inspected when the FDA arrives on site understand that this is a very serious inspection. Companies need to be prepared to provide the inspector with whatever information they are looking for. And if the inspector sees something that looks like a potential issue, then that could lead to further questions. During an inspection, an FDA field investigator will usually audit both a completed and an ongoing trial to determine a laboratory's GLP compliance. Investigators may observe conditions they deem to be objectionable. These observations are listed on FDA Form 483. According to the FDA's website, an FDA Form 483 is issued to firm management at the conclusion of an inspection when an investigator has observed any conditions that in their judgment may constitute violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and related acts. The FDA Form 483 notifies the company's management of objectionable conditions. At the conclusion of an inspection, the FDA Form 483 is presented and discussed with the company's senior management. Companies are encouraged to respond to the FDA Form 483 in writing with their corrective action plan and then implement that corrective action plan expeditiously. Following inspections, the FDA monitors corrective action. If the FDA determines that the company fails to take corrective action, then the FDA has the authority to, in extreme cases, shut down a facility through a court order. If you would like additional proof of the FDA's power, then look no further than fda.gov, news and events, FDA newsroom, and press announcements. Next, we will cover the purpose behind an investigational new drug application, or IND. When a sponsor believes it has sufficient data to show that a new drug is safe for initial small-scale clinical studies, the company will submit an investigational new drug application, or IND. The IND review process is a balance between the FDA's responsibility to protect human subjects and its desire to not adversely impact the advancement of science. In the IND, the sponsor submits the results of all preclinical testing and an analysis of what these results mean with regards to human pharmacology, an analysis of the drug's chemical composition, the manufacturing, and the quality control procedures used in producing the drug, and protocols describing the sponsor's plans for the initial stage clinical studies and information describing the qualifications of the clinical investigators. Upon reviewing an IND application, the FDA has an initial 30-day review period. Subsequent to the initial 30-day review, the FDA continues to evaluate the IND. If the FDA does not contact the sponsor within the 30-day period of the IND submission, then they may initiate clinical trials. However, if the FDA decides that a clinical trial should be delayed, then they will contact the sponsor within the 30-day period to initiate what is known as a clinical hold, which is basically a delay in starting the clinical trial until questions and/or potential issues are addressed. Next, we will cover the basics of a clinical trial. A clinical drug program typically consists of 3 phases. Phase 1 is the careful administration of a drug in a few, under 100 patients, to gain basic safety and pharmacological information. Phase 2 is the use of the drug in a larger set, 100 to 200 patients, who suffer from the condition that the drug is intended to treat. Phase 2 trials provide additional safety data and the first indication of a drug's efficacy. Phase 3, use of the drug in a significantly larger group, which is several hundred to several thousand patients, who suffer from the condition that the drug is proposed to treat. Phase 3 trials are designed to assess the drug's safety and effectiveness and to help determine the best dosage in a larger population. While clinical trials for different drugs can vary greatly in design, they are typically similar in structure. The phased approach is used because even though the preclinical testing results provide initial indications of a drug's toxicity and pharmacology, the drug's potential effects in humans are still unknown. So each phase must be carefully designed to use and build upon information generated from previous phases. Because human subjects are involved, the FDA pays close attention during clinical trials. Drug sponsors must ensure that the clinical trials are designed and conducted in ways that do not expose clinical subjects to unnecessary risks. Participating in a clinical trial involves volunteering to be part of a research study to evaluate the safety and effectiveness of a new drug. Typically, there are several steps involved, such as informed consent, screening, baseline assessments, randomization, study intervention, monitoring and follow-up, data collection, adherence to protocol, reporting side effects, close communication, and finally study completion. Next, we will cover what we mean by the term Good Clinical Practice, or GCP. GCP is a set of international ethical and scientific quality standards that ensure the design, conduct, recording, and reporting of clinical trials involving human subjects are consistent and credible. Adherence to this is essential to protect the rights and safety of trial participants and also to ensure the reliability and credibility of clinical trial results. Key aspects of GCP include ethical conduct, scientific quality, protocol compliance, data integrity and documentation, safety reporting, investigator responsibilities, monitoring and quality assurance, record keeping and archiving, regulatory compliance, and data management. Once a drug has successfully completed clinical testing, the next step would be to submit an FDA filing. This refers to the submission of regulatory documents to the FDA as part of the drug development and approval process. Examples include the Investigational New Drug application, the Electronic Common Technical Document, or ECTD, and post-marketing submissions. So this means that there are several types of regulatory submissions to the FDA. The list shown here is not intended to be a complete list. Regulatory submissions to the FDA are the formal documentation submitted in order to receive regulatory approval. Each submission type is required to have a certain type of information. The Electronic Common Technical Document, or ECTD, is one type of submission to the FDA. This is the standard format for submitting regulatory information and is a mechanism through which drug sponsors formally propose that the FDA approve the drug for sale and marketing in the U.S. In order to obtain this approval, the ECTD submitted by the manufacturer typically consists of non-clinical and clinical test data and analysis, drug chemistry information, and descriptions of manufacturing procedures. When paper submittals were being done, the new drug application at that time would literally be a tractor-trailer load of paperwork, ranging from tens of thousands to over 100,000 pages. The ECTD now provides a standardized electronic format for the organization and presentation of regulatory information. It is also internationally accepted and includes a submission lifecycle management for updates, amendments, and post-approval changes. Ultimately, it must provide enough information to prove that 1. The drug is safe and effective for its proposed use, 2. Whether the drug's proposed labeling is appropriate, and 3. Whether the methods used in manufacturing the controls used to maintain the drug's quality are adequate enough to preserve the drug's identity, strength, quality, and purity. The goal of regulatory affairs is to ensure that the pharmaceutical and biotechnology products meet the regulatory requirements for safety, efficacy, and quality set by the FDA. The Regulatory Affairs Department of a pharmaceutical company is responsible for obtaining approval for new pharmaceutical products and ensuring that the approval is maintained for as long as the company wants to keep the product on the market. Regulatory affairs professionals play a key role in navigating the complex landscape of regulations and guidelines so that new drugs and medical products can be brought to market while maintaining compliance. Regulatory affairs serves as the interface between the FDA and the company's project team and is a key conduit of communication to ensure that the project team is prepared to act upon what the FDA will require while trying to get a product approved. So it is the responsibility of regulatory affairs to keep on top of current legislation and guidelines. The FDA expects companies to take responsibility for deciding how the regulation should be interpreted. So the Regulatory Affairs Department gives advice to the project team on how best to interpret these rules. Some key objectives of pharmaceutical regulatory affairs include regulatory compliance, drug approval, clinical trial authorization, quality assurance, labeling and packaging compliance, post-marketing surveillance, global regulatory strategy, and policy advocacy. So during the drug development process, good working relations with the FDA is essential so that questions and issues can be properly addressed. Why do we need regulations? First off, we have patients for safety and efficacy assurance, informed decision making, and access to innovative therapies, for corporations, market access, product lifecycle management, compliance and risk mitigation, and for governments and regulatory authorities, public health protection, market surveillance, and policy development. If drugs were not properly regulated, it would have potentially serious and harmful consequences to public health. First off, there would be patient safety concerns, since unregulated drugs increase the risk of adverse events. Then, without systematic review and evaluation of a drug's efficacy, there would be uncertainty of its ability to provide the desired therapeutic effect. Also, inadequate regulation could result in variations in manufacturing processes, which would lead to quality control issues such as incorrect dosage levels, impurities, or contamination. And finally, it would increase the risk of fraudulent practices such as the sale of counterfeit drugs or deceptive marketing practices. So all of this would result in an increase in public mistrust, which would ultimately make people hesitant to seek medical help in order to use prescribed treatments. Listed below are the different areas which are typically regulated. Preclinical development, which are safety and toxicology studies. Clinical development, which is clinical trials and informed consent. Regulatory submissions, such as CTAs, INDs, and ECTDs. Manufacturing and quality control, which are GMP and drug batch release to the market. Post-approval surveillance. Pharmacovigilance, which are regulations in the U.S. which ensure that safety data is reported, and risk management plans. Labeling and packaging, which are content and format of prescribing information and packaging requirements to ensure clarity and accuracy of information. Advertising and promotion, which is adherence to regulations governing advertising to consumers and oversight of promotional materials for healthcare professionals. Inspections and audits, where authorities conduct inspections to ensure compliance with regulations at various stages of drug development and post-approval. And finally, market access and pricing, which is the analysis of the cost versus benefits of the health technology. Lastly, we have several different functions within regulatory affairs. First, they collaborate with cross-functional teams such as scientists, clinicians, quality assurance, and the corporation's legal department. Next, they prepare and publish regulatory submissions and annual reports. Third, they serve as a liaison between the company and the various global health authorities. And finally, they ensure company compliance to global regulations and adaptations to changes in the regulations. So as a discipline, regulatory affairs covers a broad range of specific skills and occupations. Typically, it's made up of people who act as a liaison between the government, industry, and consumers to help make sure that marketed products are safe and effective when used as advertised. People who work in regulatory affairs often negotiate the interaction between the regulators or the government, the industry that is being regulated, and the consumer market. The ultimate goal is to get good products to the market and keep them on the market while preventing bad products from being released to the public. That's it for this video. For more information about how I can be of value to you as a business analyst within the pharmaceutical industry, please feel free to visit my website at hughesitconsulting.com.